Hey, what's up, everybody? Podcast time.
Yo!
Got Bebo behind the camera / mic. This is, we call him Sack. Chris Saccarillo.
Sure.
Chris Saccarillo is married to Rachel Saccarillo, who does all of our discipleship, connection, coordination stuff around here. Y'all been married how long?
Almost 17 years.
Wow, 17 years.
She's the better half.
He's the last of his family to end up on here.
You are the last of your family
That's
to end
true.
up
My
on the
kids
podcast.
got through this first.
What was that, like a random summer day where they were here and I brought them on?
Like a summer, and we just had so many people out of the office or preparing for Socastee campus that we said, we got to record 4 podcasts.
Yeah, that's
this
true.
week. Let's record them. And Gabe, Jevin, and Xander walked right by, and we said, hey, y'all come here.
and Javon crushed it.
He did. I watched that one. I was impressed. I was like, man. First of all, I was mostly impressed that you got him to say so many words
I was too.
in like one sitting.
I honestly thought that I was just going to have to carry conversation and nobody was going to say anything to me. And then he had conversation with me. Mm-hmm. It was very impressive. He's how old? 15? 14?
He's going to be 15.
Going to be 15.
In September. He is a very deep thinker like Rachel. But once he gets comfortable and you actually hear him talk about it, you'll be surprised.
Yeah, and I think not seeing all those people out there, just having a small room, it made him way more comfortable to be able to have those conversations.
Absolutely.
And the next man, I think all he said was yes the whole time, right, Caleb? I'd ask him questions and he'd say yes or I don't know. Yeah.
You got an I don't know once.
And he's what, 6 or 7?
He just turned 8.
Dang, 8.
Just turned 8 this week. This week, actually.
So, a lot of stuff going on in the world, a lot of stuff going on in life, and it is always nice to have different voices on the podcast to be able to hear your thoughts, your perspectives. How long have you been following Christ? How long have you say, I have been a full, sometimes we go to church whenever we're little, but where was the moment where you said, I am a fully committed, devoted follower of Jesus Christ. I'm going to live and die for him for the rest of my life. How old were you, or how long have you been walking that path?
I remember very vividly when I was 15 that summer. It was one of the first summers I went to youth camp with the church we were attending. I'm a strong believer in youth camps. I know there's a lot that goes on youth camps.
For sure.
Some people have some phenomenal stories. Some people have some stories that they don't like. But overall, I believe that it's so beneficial. So when I was 15, that was the summer that I accepted Christ as my Savior, that it was my conscious decision.
Yeah.
And then...
And where were you at this time? You're not in North Carolina.
We were in North Carolina.
You were in North Carolina then.
Yeah, we were. We were at the Nazarene church that we were attending in North Carolina.
How many kids were at the camp?
Gosh, that's a good question.
Hundreds, thousands,
No.
tens?
Probably.
Put me in a ballpark.
Probably about, I'd say 200.
200
plus.
Nice.
So
It's a good sized camp.
It's a good sized camp.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All teenagers.
All teenagers. That was fun. It wasn't broken up into 3 age groups like here. It was more like 2 age groups.
Yep.
So I was 15. So anybody, I guess, probably the youngest would have been 10 up to high school. So 18, 19. So pretty good range.
So 15-year-old, you say I'm committing to Christ.
Yeah.
So obviously there's bumps and bruises along the way. There's some highs and lows through that process. But so now you are 40?
Yep, 41.
41.
41.
So for the last 25 years-ish, you've been following the Lord.
Absolutely.
So you have a perspective from somebody who is, I'll call you a lay minister. Lay minister meaning he's just volunteering his time. This is what he does. This is before his wife was ever on staff here. They were 2 of the most committed volunteers that we've ever had in our church. They just his kids are some of the most committed volunteers that we've ever had in our church.
Yeah.
They're just highly committed lay leaders inside of our church. They just did it with their boots on the this and people started following them because of the life that they live. So you're going to get the perspective today from someone who is this isn't your job. This isn't what you do for a living. You fix elevators for a living. Install or fix? What do you do?
Done
Both?
a little bit of all of it.
Yeah.
Installed, fixed, worked on. So my daily job is more mechanical and analytical.
Of course it is. Why wouldn't it be analytical?
Why wouldn't it? Works perfectly.
So you're going to get perspective from somebody who is just a normal average Joe church member. This isn't somebody who gets paid to do this. This is somebody who does this because at 15, the Lord changed his life, and he loves what he does. I think he loves what he does. He loves what he does and is committed to the call of Christ in his life. So as you go through that journey, understand, like, you know, we talked to, like, the last time we had Rachel on here. Caleb, have you made her a bobblehead yet? Get the girl a bobblehead.
Sitting in the car. I haven't got the card information from
That's why she couldn't be here today. She doesn't have a bobblehead yet.
So the last time we talked to her, we talked about the difficulty of home life / ministry / this is your job. You know, all of those things that pair together / this is your friend group. This is your family. This is what we do. We hang out because we love hanging out, not because, oh no, this is my job. I have to hang out with the Saccarillos. No, I get to enjoy hanging out and spending time with Chris. So this is the completely opposite side of the spectrum whenever you're talking to someone like Chris. And I love having different voices on the podcast to be able to see different perspectives from everybody in the church, and not just me, not just Caleb, but for everybody. I'm loving this. So 25 years serving the Lord, 2 kids, married, and analytical about elevators.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. I'm analytical about a lot.
How long y'all been at the church?
We've been at this church as long as Xander's been alive, 8 years.
8 years.
So I started work on elevators January of 2015 when he was born. And then in August, the whole family moved here from Raleigh. So I was commuting for the first 6 months because this was a career opportunity for us. This was a life change. Yep. We started coming that fall. I think it was probably September, October. We happened to walk in the church. I know that story's probably been told on here already. So for those of you,
I don't think so, but it's a great day to tell it.
It is a great story
because yesterday I preached on the love of God, the unstoppable love of God, and we talk about the love that's in our church and how one of the things I say in Starting Point is all the time is that that Christ loved us even while we were sinners, and so it only makes sense for us to love one another. And so your wife is one of those that she is very awkward about love, very similar to my wife. My wife is very awkward about love, affection, like, being hugged or, whatever. And so you come into our church and everybody hugs you, and everybody, I mean, it's your first time, your second time, and she's getting hugged and she's super awkward. I think she sent the church an email and said, I really like the church, but y'all love a little too much, or something to that effect.
I'm pretty sure she might have mentioned it to somebody. I'm not sure if she said anything. I know after time, I believe it was Kimberly Basher and Lady Maddie that were the two that, like, she had the interaction with the first that would have heard that from her. And her kind of perspective was, this church is just, they're too nice, they're too loving. Which to her is kind of over the top, but you also, knowing her long enough, she does not operate in extremes either. So it has to be, it's hard to accept sometimes that a church can be that genuine, but at the same time, that loving, and that what some people would see as over the top.
For sure. She definitely, I think, and she's in a Rubik's Cube. She's very complex. But she doesn't operate in extremes, but has a very extreme, almost adventurous side of her, seemingly, to someone from the outside looking in.
Yeah, she definitely keeps the adventure side of our life in general alive, like, for what she thrives for. Like, if anything, I would say she's constantly seeking after a deepness of God, especially in his creation. So that draws us to the outside, is what a lot of people will see as, oh, you guys just like to be outside, or you like to be super adventurous. Yeah. She does kind of have a thrill seeker side. We have the motorcycle that she loves to ride. She loves kind of that thrill. But at the same time, too, there's a deep appreciation and commitment that she has to her faith. So that's where people see the adventure side of our life, that she is. I'm thankful that she's there, because if she wasn't, I would get too wrapped up in the day-to-day, like, structure, and I would forget to enjoy the adventure.
Yeah, for sure. It's good. All right, so we're too loving. We got too much love. Everybody's so way too welcoming. We talk about the unstoppable love of God. That there's no, we ended service yesterday with the song "Reckless Love." No mountain you won't climb up. No door you won't kick down. Coming after me. Where can I go to get away from your presence? If I go to the heavens, you're there. If I go to the pits of hell, you're there. What can separate us from the love of God? Not death nor life, sword, peril, famine. None of those things can separate us from the love of God. And so this unstoppable love that God has for you, for I, and this love that we have, it affects our relationships with others. And so because we've experienced this love that God has shown us, it in turn pushes us to extend this love and ultimately forgiveness and mercy and grace, things of that nature, to other people in our lives. So let's talk about your life specifically.
Okay.
What are some things in your life where you say, I've experienced the love of God, and so I acted this way here when probably other people in my life would have acted this way? Does that question make sense to you?
Oh, man. Yeah.
I told you. See, they gave him questions, and then they said, hey, be ready. Pastor may not go down any of these directions, or he may. So he came in ready with all of these questions, and then the first one's a curveball for you.
I like that. I think almost our whole life, we've talked about this before, and even our marriage is a story of provision.
Yeah.
So I would say that having this faith that God is always there regardless, I think gives me a different perspective in general in life. So when we've gone through struggles or we've gone through trials, there's moments where I experience like just being depressed and wanting to give up. At the same time, also knowing deep down that there was hope, there was faith, there was a light at the end of the tunnel.
Sure.
And I think if anything in a Christian walk, that's what kind of helps separate us from the world in a sense, to where when we go down that depressive state of mind, or we experience depressive moments, we experience trials, we experience rough moments, those are inevitable in our life. There's no way you're going to be able to avoid every single one of those. I think it's the faith that we have, and there is a knowing that God is always there that helps to kind of push us over that hill, if you will,
for sure,
to get to the other side of it. So I would say in my life, I've experienced a lot of hurt from friends, a lot of pain. There was a time in my life where I would be seen as very cynical, kind of in my thought of friendships, where they're very limited. So I was hurt by a lot of friends that I would have considered close, with people that I'm not even in contact anymore now for various reasons, to where I experienced that pain, I experienced that hurt. And if not for our faith, if not for a God that loved me through all of my faults, I would be a very cynical person that basically just said friendships are pointless.
So good. And you and I have had these conversations before about different relationships in our life. And one of the things that you and I have in common is we both love really hard.
Oh, absolutely.
And so if I'm committed to you, I am fully committed to you. You know, I tell people in leadership development, I'm a loyal dog. Yeah. I am committed to you until you tell me you don't want me in your life anymore. I am committed to you. And sometimes when you love seemingly way too hard to other people in our culture, they say you shouldn't love that hard, or you shouldn't act like that. When you're doing that, it's easy to get hurt when someone doesn't love as hard or as much or reciprocate the love. But we have to continue doing those things because it's the way God's loved us. God has loved us with such an unstoppable, crazy amount of love, even when we haven't reciprocated that love, that the only thing that makes sense is to love others. So, yeah, agree totally. Yeah. It's tough. How do you tell your kids? Because this is the cynical side of this, right? So how do you push your kids into loving as hard as you do, but also protect them from relationships that they're going to get into?
Some of this happens naturally because they're brothers.
Okay.
So they like to they don't always get along. They're amazing kids. There are moments because you live in close-knit quarters, whether or not you're in a car or in a house, and it definitely gives opportunities for discord to exist. Mm-hmm. So it starts just with their relationship with each other, that you have to understand how to love people when they're sad, when they're frustrated, when you're sad, when you're frustrated, when you don't know what to do, or when you can't even think in your own mind what the next step is. So I think that in and of itself, just building their relationship as brothers first and learning how to treat each other is a foundation that we've tried
100%.
to use to create so that they can understand, look, you should love your brother this much too. Then in scripture where it talks about loving your brother and loving yourself as you love everybody else, the same way to where they can take that concept and be able to love those that are in their small circles, love those that are in their large circles. So the hope is that we can teach them just by helping them to learn to work through things together.
Love it. Love it. Speaking of kids.
Yes.
You love them, so you discipline them, correct?
Yes. They don't always like it.
The Bible says whom God loves, he disciplines. He chastises. And so I love my kids, and so I will say to them, hey, Caleb, I'm not going to let you do this because you did this or because I'm protecting you from this. And oftentimes as a 19-year-old, now Caleb's great about it when it comes to outside perspective. What Caleb doesn't understand a lot of times is sometimes you're trying to protect him from himself. Like Caleb has a tendency to joke hard. True. And to be he's so much like my brother. Anything for a laugh. If it hurts your feelings, it doesn't matter. I got a laugh out of it. I'm good. And sometimes you're putting discipline in place to even protect him from himself, to which he doesn't like that. But if I say to my girls, hey, I don't want you to go out there and walk on the boulevard because I'm trying to protect you, they understand that. But sometimes protecting them from themselves is very difficult for them to fully grasp. And so as we think about our relationship with Christ and a father who loves us and so he disciplines us, I think sometimes we don't understand that sometimes he's disciplining us or protecting us from ourselves because we are in our flesh very destructive, very very selfish, very driven towards worldly lust and desires. And sometimes the discipline that we're experiencing may seem as if it hurts our desires, but actually in return, what God is trying to do is protect you. So as people are talking about the discipline of God, you have these people in your life all the time. I don't know who's in your small group. I haven't seen a list in a while, but I'm sure there's somebody in your small group coming in, sitting down with you and saying, Chris, you got to help me. I just feel like God is whooping me right now. That's the old country saying God is whooping them. And so your response to God is whooping me right now is what?
Is whooping me right now. I've been whooped.
So I was about to say I've been whooped. I'll ramble and let you think a little bit. I've been whooped. God has whooped me at times. I tell people all the time, there's very few days that I sit down and read my Bible and don't think I'm getting a whooping from the Lord right now. I'm not that person that I'm reading about right there that you're telling me to be. I am not that person. I want to be, but I'm not that person.
I feel like a lot of times it depends on where they are at, even in their Christian walk. And the reason I say that is because I think about how I discipline our kids.
100%.
And Rachel had to keep me in check on this because I am analytical. I'm like, well, I want them to learn this lesson. And she's like, that's awesome, but he's 5. He doesn't understand that lesson yet. And at the same time, then you've got his brother who's 7 years older that I can explain things to him differently. So then there's this balance of, well, how come this person, how come he's allowed to do that and I'm not allowed to do this?
My kids go through it all the time.
I feel like the same thing happens with people in our circle that we are discipling to where they're like, well, how come I'm experiencing this and so went through something similar and experiencing something different? They're in a different place in their Christian walk than you are. And I feel like God meets us where we're at. So I feel like his discipline for us looks different. So sometimes like protecting us from ourselves, I think there's moments where I know that God has stepped into my life and removed friends from my life. And that's painful. And it hurt.
Yeah.
It hurt. It was painful. And there's some times and then there's certain times where he has brought it to my attention and I had to be the one to separate from that friendship for the betterment of my life and for myself. And not to say that those times can't be rekindled or certain things can't be healed. That's not always the case either. There are moments where you can and where you can't, or where it's possible and not possible, whether physically, emotionally, or just distance wise, depending on where those people live. So when people come to me and they're struggling or asking a question like that, oftentimes I'll have to think about where they are at in their Christian walk.
For sure.
Because that's going to dictate my response to them.
For sure. Agree completely. And the same way you tell your 15-year-old, this is what discipline looks like to you, your 8-year-old, that's not what discipline looks like to him.
No, it's different.
And honestly, even all 3 of my kids, you discipline different. We were talking about this last night where Caleb, you could threaten him with a whooping and he would straighten up and be great. Like the greatest kid ever. You didn't have to whoop him, just threaten him. Carson, you could whoop her and she wouldn't care a bit, but you put her in the corner and say, you're in timeout, and it was like the end of the world for her. Cammie, you threatened to take away things from her. Your baby doll, your, dress. She was into dresses one time. We threatened to make her wear jeans, and so all 3 of my kids, you had to discipline completely different. And that's okay. Yeah. Because the father's job is to understand his kids so that when he disciplines, that he understands the outcome is for their best good, for their good, for their best. And so I think it's the same way in our walk with Christ. And sometimes even when you're in those situations where you're being disciplined, it will make you, if you're not careful, if you don't know the truth of God, it'll make you question the love of God. Mm-hmm. Does God really love me right now? Mm-hmm. Does Dad really love me because Dad took away this from me?
And I think that's a big thing that we've tried to instill in our kids, that we always come back to, is like, we still love you. Even in this situation, even when this happens, we still love you. And I think the deeper that we understand God's love, the deeper we're able to do that, even with our kids in the moment of discipline. And I think that's actually what helps. I think that you have to come back to that, not only just to remind them, but also to remind ourselves, like, I might be going through this tough time. That doesn't mean that God doesn't love me because of it. So I've always been very cautious, because of my past experience as a kid, to try to be in a place where I never discipline my children out of anger. Yeah. If I'm frustrated or I'm annoyed, I have to step away before I can dish out a consequence, per se. So I don't want to offer a consequence out of frustration or a consequence out of anger, because I feel like that doesn't help them inevitably, regardless of their personality. Like you were talking about personalities. Yeah. I think it's always important to remind them that they're loved. Like, for example, our kids' personalities, they're different. Like Xander's a huge physical touch kid. Spanking him would have been a terrible idea. Right. Because he associates all physical touch with how I care about him. Right. So if I was to spank him, then that's different for him. He's going to receive that completely differently as someone who perceives physical touch as love differently than, per se, Jevin. And just to be clear, like, we didn't spank our kids, and multiple reasons why we didn't in that moment. I know some people don't agree. Some people will agree. Sure. They were still disciplined. We just didn't physically strike them. Sure. And that was because of part of our upbringings and what we experienced. And because, one, Jevin, honestly, I don't think it really would have impacted him very much. He's a whole different personality.
Well, whatever you did to raise your kids, you did a phenomenal job.
Rachel gets like 98% of the credit. No.
My kids, last night we were at dinner, or 2 nights ago we were at dinner, and Carson says to me, Xander's he's 8. Yeah. So he's still a kid. Oh, yeah. She says, Xander's a good kid. She said, but Jevin is an angel. And she's like, no. She's like, no. Like, she was talking about her and her brother and sister. She's like, we're all good kids. Like, we don't do anything wrong. We're all good kids. She said, I'm not talking about just being a good kid. Like, he's an angel. And so whatever you did something really, really right.
We love that boy. Both of our boys were absolute miracles. Yep. The first one literally they told us, you can't get pregnant. Awesome. Guess what? 2 weeks later, God's like, boom. I kid you not. It was
that was with Jevin.
2 weeks after the appointment. And we could even go back to that. Phenomenal doctor, by the way. Great doctor. Helped actually figure out a lot of things that needed addressed, but literally said, like trying to give us like not his doctor perspective. Yep. He said, my perspective, he's like, this is the situation you're kind of in. You can't get pregnant. And we're like, man, this sucks.
And the Lord was like, let me show
The Lord
you.
was like, let me show you something. Let me show you what I got. And we're like, okay, there we go. And then Xander too, right? We had some health issues and we didn't know if that was going to be possible. And so Xander is a complete miracle as well. So we're very thankful for both.
All right, let's take a little turn here.
Okay, let's go.
Because you are passionate about parenting and you are passionate about marriage.
Absolutely.
Something that you and I, we do, not you and I together, but like Rachel and Chris and Jamie and Maddie do Marriage 101.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the last few times together we've done it where we each have our own kind of group and we're all kind of investing and mentoring into them. So you're passionate about marriage. You're passionate about parenting. So you got parents watching, a lot of parents watching. And like give us a piece of parenting advice. Give us something where you would say, hey, this really helped. I got an 8-year-old and a 15-year-old, so I can't really give you great parenting advice for what it means to raise a teenager or, you know, how to walk through grandkids or anything like that. But here goes some parenting advice I have for raising younger kids. Give us some.
I think the most important thing that we've noticed is disciplining them in a way of understanding what your purpose is in the moment. Yep. And by that, I mean, depending on what the behavior is, like, is my goal in that moment just to stop the behavior? Or is my goal in the moment for my kid to experience a loving tenderness in the midst of adversity? So, like, I mean, if my kid's about to run into the street and I'm stopping them instantly, like, it's a different reaction than if I see that my kid is headed toward a group of friends that I know is a bad influence on them. So I'm going to dissuade them differently. So I think, one, when it comes to disciplining and parenting, in the moment, before you give the discipline, understand what you want the purpose of the discipline to be. And as they grow, that will change. Clearly, in the beginning, it might just be to keep them physically safe. Yeah. Like, I don't want them to fall off the roof of the house, so don't get on the house. We've let them jump off the shed before. Yeah. That's a whole different story. Rachel's rollerblade off the shed.
2 years old.
No, not at 2 years old.
Right.
So I think as they grow, that shifts.
Because if you saw them on the shed at 2 years old,
like,
you're screaming and running out there. And,
absolutely.
Right. Correcting them. How did you get on the shed? All of that sort of stuff.
Now
so all of those are perspectives of how things change as they grow.
Yeah. So understand the point of the discipline, or understand what you want the purpose of the discipline to be.
That's really good.
I think you have to start there.
I'll add on to that. One of the things that I always say and have always said, and we don't get it right, even to today, we don't get this right. But one of the things is I try not to get angry about, I call it folly. I try not to get angry about you're not cleaning your room. I get angry about disobedience or disrespect or sin, sinful things that create sin inside of you. I get angry over those things, but I try not to get angry over you broke a glass. I don't care that you broke a glass. It's okay. The glass is, we can fix that, But lying to me about breaking the glass is where I always got upset. Mm-hmm. So I think I would just add on to what he's saying with parents. Your reaction is so vital to the kids' upbringing. Like, it's okay to get angry about stuff that, and again, angry is a strange word in our culture. I'm not talking about angry at them. I'm talking about angry at the situation, to which then you bring correction in a godly manner about sinful things. Hey, my kid, there's some things that if I said on here that we did as parents that, somebody would call DSS on us, because, we probably, not beating them, but from timeout to now, you can't even, culture has changed so much. When I was growing up, you just got a beating for everything, not me, everybody around me, every kid just got a beating for everything. And they wanted the kids to be perfect little, models in the corner, and didn't allow kids to express their personalities, to which then they had to express their personalities behind mom and dad's back, to which then is why you had so many people living kind of double standard, completely different lifestyles behind mom and dad's back. So anyways, my perspective would be, don't get angry at them. Get angry at the situation, but it's okay to be frustrated or angered by sinful things that they're doing. Busting a glass, dropping a dropping milk all over the floor. That's terrible, and it's going to stink, and you're going to be frustrated. I get it. But don't get angry at them for an accident.
Yeah, I think it's important also to separate those, what's accidental, what's intentional. And honestly, Rachel's brought the most awareness to this. What is dysregulation? Like when they're just struggling with comprehending the situation. Because some people get so angry with their kids in a moment where the kid doesn't understand how to handle the situation, so they're frustrated too. Well, if you react in frustration, you're just going to add to their frustration rather than actually helping them through the situation.
For sure.
Which goes back to also their personalities and understanding that. So one, know the purpose of the discipline. Two, understand the child and what their personality is and understand what you want them to gain or learn from the situation. So do I want them to understand that in this moment, I just need them to be safe? Do I want them to understand that as they experience adversity, how to not just have thicker skin? Do I want them to understand how to have perseverance? Am I trying to teach that in this moment? Am I trying to teach them just how to be kind? Am I trying to teach them how to turn the other cheek? Like, there are different moments in each situation, and if I don't know what I'm trying to teach them in that moment, that's the teacher side of me trying to go that route.
Sure.
Then your discipline just looks like frustration. Because what am I like? For those of us that get frustrated over disorder or things that are out of place, breaking a glass or stuff like that, if we get frustrated about things like that, well, we're reacting out of our own dysregulation. So if we're teaching our kids that in the moment, well, that's not going to be beneficial to them because they're not going to gain anything from it. So you have to pick and choose your battles, I think, is a phrase a lot of people use.
It's good. That's good. So the parent, the father disciplines, so we get that loving aspect of the father. And then ultimately we should love our wives as Christ loved the church. So you get that unstoppable love of a husband to a wife. So give the people, everybody watching probably is married or wants to be married or knows somebody. Hopefully everybody on here knows somebody that's married. So give us some marriage advice. So you've been married for 17 years?
Almost January will be 17 years.
17 years. Give us some marriage advice to the people watching.
One of the things I go back to, and this is probably my favorite perspective of marriage, is that it's a choice. It's a daily choice. We are not always going to like every moment we experience in life. We're not going to like certain things that our spouse does. Like it's almost impossible. If you do like every single thing your spouse does, that's amazing. It's probably a miracle. Let us know. But there are going to be opportunities in time, and I try to look at them as opportunities. There's going to be opportunities and times in your marriage where you're not going to like everything that your spouse does, that your spouse thinks, or you're not always going to agree on every bit of it. But what you can do is you can always choose to love your spouse every single day, regardless of what's going on around you.
And love them meaning what?
And love them meaning choose to show them care, choose to be patient with them even when you don't want to be. Choose to make the hard choice and swallow your pride and apologize first, even if you don't think you're the one that was wrong. That's tough,
love,
but
right?
That's reality,
right? Like, and you and I, we both
love our wives.
We both adore our wives,
absolutely.
And for us, 1 Corinthians 13, that love chapter is the definition of love. So when my son is in a relationship with a girl and he's starting to feel feelings towards her and starting to think, you know what, I could spend forever with this person. Not that he is. I'm just saying, like, if those are things that are happening in the future, then the question shouldn't be, do I think she's pretty? The question shouldn't be, am I attracted to her? I mean, you should be attracted to her and you should think she's pretty.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the question should be, am I willing to choose this person to be patient and kind and long-suffering and not proud and not puffed up and be quick to apologize? All of those things that you get in 1 Corinthians 13, am I willing to do that for this person? Although he may not have been willing to do that for his sisters, but is he willing to do that for her?
Yeah, I think it's important as a husband with kids and with those in your circle and with those you're trying to disciple to live that out. So for me, like what that looks like is even though my wife and I might have a moment, even in a group where we disagree, it's being able to look at each other in the moment and realize, all right, we're not necessarily going to agree on this in the moment, but we both understand what we need to do to move on from the moment. And we can have a conversation about it later if we want to. One of the biggest things that I know that she does that I know that I feel love from her is supporting me even behind closed doors. Yeah. So that's my other piece of advice is when you're choosing to love your spouse, I think it goes both ways. You're choosing to love your spouse when they're in front of you, but you're also choosing to love your spouse when they're not in front of you, especially when they're not in front of you. You need to protect your spouse from other people saying negative things about them. You need to protect yourself and protect your spouse and talk well of them and talk highly of them when they're not with you, so that other people understand your perspective, and so that your kids can understand what it's like to love a spouse. Like, it should be modeled that way, so that they understand, so that when they do find that person that they're interested in, this is what it means to love them. Mom and dad don't always have to agree. Mom and dad don't always have to like everything that happens, but I have seen mom and dad at the end of the day, they love each other, they care about each other, and they're going to move on and pick the big battles when necessary.
Agree. All right, let's end here.
Okay.
What does it look like to you as you are working on elevators and, running a small group, loving your wife, disciplining your kids, all of these things that are reflections of the love of God? What does it look like to you to reflect the love of God in your everyday life? What does that look like to you?
I'd say at work, oftentimes it's reflected in my relationship with customers or clients that we interact with. I don't say this to be boastful, but even my boss will tell me at the same time, he's like, I need you on a service route because you're good with customers. I think it's being patient when people don't expect you to be. Yeah. Listen, when we're working on elevators, the majority of the time when we get a call, something's broken. So people are already frustrated before we get there. They're frustrated that something's not working. So I have to show up and I'm like, they're typically not in a good mood. So they're frustrated with me and I haven't even gotten there yet. Like, I don't even know what happened. It could be something that we might have missed on maintenance, or it could be that someone just did something stupid or dumb, honestly.
For sure.
We've had people kick doors in. Like, they kick the door off. Like, I can't prevent that. But people are still frustrated with us. So in the moment, I feel like at work, it's shown in just trying to be patient with customers and clients. With my other employees or other people that we work with my brothers and the other mechanics that I'm with, for me with them, it's not being frustrated, not letting the day get to me, knowing that I'll quote unquote talk them off a ledge, because they'll call me and they'll be like, I'm frustrated. You got to talk me off a ledge right now because I'm really irritated with people. Yeah. And honestly, my language, like, I try to hold my tongue a ton at work. I'm around a lot of people, like, cursing is part of their normal everyday. Yeah. For me, it's not. I feel like I should be conscious enough and smart enough to watch my dialogue and be careful how I control my tongue. So am I always the happiest? No. Do I have frustrating moments? Yes. Am I perfect? Absolutely not. But they know that that's something I strive to do. Yeah. So that's my witness to those that I work with.
I think everybody in today's culture is frustrated about everything. From my elevators broke to driving down the road and people not moving fast enough or not getting out of the way that they shouldn't be in this lane, to the people at the fast food restaurant that didn't make your order quick enough and you're just frustrated. Why did it take 17 minutes here? And I could go into a ton of other, layers of this. Somebody, you're in the grocery store and you pick the line where the person needs a pack of cigarettes and every pack they choose is the wrong one, and you're just frustrated that they won't pick the right pack of cigarettes so I can get checked out and moved on. And every area of our life, it feels like there's so much frustration. And if we could just find a way to show kindness and patience in the midst of all of the frustrations of this world right now, from social media, if we could just bite our tongue a little bit on social media or crack our knuckles before we decide to write
the
that
lock screen instead of the keyboard.
Yeah. If we could do some of those things, I think people would see the love of God in us even more than they do right now, because right now so often we look just like everybody else.
I have an interesting thought about this because I was reading through some of these questions, and to go with what you're saying, I feel like the word limitless comes to my mind, or limitations. And the reason I say that is because we talk about the unstoppable love of God. And if you're really to grasp that, you have to be able to understand the concept that it is limitless, absolutely limitless. And our world is the exact opposite right now. Yeah. There's limitations on everything. There's limitations on our attention span. There's limitations on how much you can do in a day. There's limitations on how fast you can go. There's limitations on our ability to, get so many things at any given time. And I think that there's limitations on love in the way that people put it in our cancel culture was really big. People called it cancel culture, but if you look at it, really, it's basically putting a limitation on how much we're willing to love or be patient or care for people. Yeah. So as we try to bring this impression of God's unstoppable love, honestly, I feel like it really comes down, the simplest way that I've looked at it is limitless versus limitations. Our world does nothing but impose limitations. Our government imposes limitations. Our number of hours of sleep you have is a natural limitation, but then you also have self-imposed limitations. And I think that those limitations are what distract you from realizing and being able to grasp this concept that God's unstoppable love is literally limitless.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Man, you should write a sermon on that. It's powerful. I love it. All right. Thank y'all for tuning in. Thank you for hanging out with us for a few minutes. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks for
Appreciate you being here.
Yeah, absolutely.
What does your tattoo mean? What's the key?
This key is... I'll move the water bottle. There we go. So I wanted a skeleton key because I like the old school concept of skeleton keys.
I see the cross at the bottom of it.
The cross at the bottom. We had a pastor that came in and was a special speaker during one of the sacred seasons. She talked about how we're the key.
Debbie Dykes.
Yes. I don't want to say her name wrong. So I actually have this tattoo to remind me I'm literally the key to some people's eternity. Amen. In a sense, like, not that I'm the key, like Jesus is the eternal key and God is that pathway, but it's a reminder I literally have opportunity to turn a door for every single person I come in contact with. So this is my reminder, like this, I love the nautical compass, like it can point any direction. I like that idea. The old school concept of the skeleton key, I love, just, it reminds me of the age. And then the cross, that being the fit for the key or the mold to actually turn that. So I see it every day. Like I look down and I put it there on purpose. Yeah. Some people have asked me about it. They're like, hey, what's that mean? And it gives me an opportunity just to have a conversation. But for me, really, this was my constant reminder that we're that key sometimes. We're that, you hand out the keys, like, being that one, but that's my key.
I love it. Love it. Absolutely love it. All right. Thank y'all. Appreciate you. Have a wonderful day. God bless. Peace out. Let's go.